Stop. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Subscribe now. We have new stories every day. Now, let's go. Adrian Quinn rolled his shoulders as he pulled into the driveway of his suburban home. The late afternoon sun cast long strips of orange light across the hood of his car. He'd spent 14 hours finalizing the nightly project, a major engineering feat that would revolutionize water filtration systems across 3 states. The company had given him tomorrow office thanks, and for once, he was looking forward to spending an uninterrupted evening with his family. He killed the engine and sat for a moment. Through the windshield, he studied the 2-story house he bought 10 years ago. The meticulously maintained lawn, the fresh coat of paint from last summer, the swing on the porch where he taught Brianna to read, all paid for with countless overtime hours and weekends spent hunched over his desk instead of at family barbecues. Adrian grabbed his briefcase from the passenger seat and stepped out of the car. He was a tall man, just over 6 feet, with salt and pepper hair cropped short against the scalp. At 42, he still maintained the disciplined physique of his younger days in construction, before he'd earned his engineering degree taking night classes. His colleagues call him the machine, not just for his analytical mind, but for his unwavering reliability. As he approached the front door, he noticed Reggie Dawson's weathered pickup truck parked down the street. Something twisted in Adrian's gut. Reggie had been Daphne's friend since before their marriage, a connection Adrian had tolerated despite the man's tendency to ask for loans he never repaid and job recommendations he never deserved. Probably just dropped by to mooch dinner again, Adrian muttered, inserting his key in the lock. The house was oddly quiet as he stepped inside. Usually the TV would be on, or Brianna would be playing music loud enough to rattle the windows. He set his briefcase down by the door. Daphne? Brianna. I'm home early. No answer. Adrian loosened his tie and walked toward the kitchen. Empty. The dining room. Empty. Living room. Empty, but there was an open wine bottle on the coffee table. 2 glasses, one with a smudge of his wife's signature red lipstick. Then he heard it, a faint thump from upstairs, followed by a muffled laugh. His wife's laugh. Adrian stood at the bottom of the stairs, suddenly feeling like an intruder in his own home. His heart pounded against his ribs with such force, he thought it might crack bone. Years of disciplined control kept him from calling out again. He climbed the stairs one by one, each step deliberately silent on the carpet runner he'd installed last spring. The master bedroom door was partially open, spilling a wedge of light into the hallway. The sounds grew clearer, hushed voices, rustling sheets, his wife's breathless giggle. Adrian pushed the door open. Time seemed to freeze. Every detail burned into his retinas with painful clarity. The tangled sheets, Daphne's blonde hair spilled across the pillow he slept on. Reggie Dawson's tattooed back, their discarded clothes making a trail from the doorway to the bed. The bed Adrian had paid for. Daphne saw him first. Her eyes widened, lips parting in shock. She didn't scream, didn't scramble for the sheets, just stared. Reggie turned, his smug face morphing from confusion to a strange, challenging look. Not shame, not embarrassment, almost satisfaction. Adrian remained in the doorway, his expression blank, his body completely still. This was not how a normal man reacted. Normal men shouted, broke things, attacked. But Adrian's rage was a cold thing, a calculating thing. It settled in his chest like ice, spreading through his veins until he felt nothing but a detached clarity. The silence stretched, heavy and electric. Say something, Daphne finally said, her voice surprisingly steady. Before Adrian could respond, the sound of a backpack hitting the floor broke the tension. He turned to see Brianna standing in the hallway, her face contorted with emotion, not shock, not horror, but anger directed at him. Why don't you just disappear, Dad? Brianna spat, her voice cracking. Adrian stared at his 17-year-old daughter, the child he'd taught to ride a bike, the girl he'd stayed up with during nightmares, the teenager whose college fund he'd been filling since the day she was born. Now she looked at him like he was nothing. Daphne pulled the sheet around her and stood up, suddenly finding modesty necessary. You need to accept a new reality. You're not in charge anymore. Reggie snickered, reaching for his jeans. Adrian's gaze tracked the movement but remained eerily calm. Brianna stepped closer, her face flushed. Uncle Reggie is more of a father than you ever were. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Adrian felt something deep inside him crack and break away. 17 years of sacrifices, 17 years of putting his family first, all dismissed in a single sentence. He looked at his wife, his daughter, the stranger in his bed. These people were no longer his family. They were opponents, and Adrian had never lost to an opponent. Without a word, he turned around and walked to the guest room. He pulled a suitcase from the closet and began methodically packing his clothes. His movements were precise, controlled, each fold perfect, each item arranged with military efficiency. Footsteps approached. Daphne appeared in the doorway, a robe hastily tied around her waist. That's it. No fight, no argument. She was almost disappointed, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth, as if his pain would have given her satisfaction. Adrian zipped the suitcase closed. Enjoy your new life. You'll regret it. There was something in his tone that made Daphne's smirk falter for just a moment. Not a threat, a promise, delivered with the same certainty he used when predicting structural failures in his engineering models. He brushed past her, carrying his suitcase downstairs. As he gathered his keys and wallet, he could hear them upstairs. Laughter, Reggie's booming voice saying something he couldn't quite make out, Brianna's giggling response. Adrian stepped outside into the gathering dusk. The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded more final than if he'd slammed it. In his mind, he was already planning, calculating every asset, every account, every vulnerability. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd broken him. They had no idea what was coming. The apartment Adrian rented was nothing like his home. One bedroom, basic furnishings, walls the color of cigarette ash. But it had a desk for his laptop, reliable internet, and most importantly, nobody who would betray him. He spent the first night setting up his command center, a notebook for tracking every account, every asset, his laptop open to banking websites, phone set to record all calls. Adrian operated with the precision of a military strategist, cataloging the battlefield before making his first move. Sleep didn't come. He didn't expect it to, didn't need it. Adrenaline and cold purpose kept him sharp as the digital clock ticked past midnight, then 1, then 4. By morning, he had a complete inventory of everything he owned and everything Daphne thought she owned. The house, the cars, the retirement accounts, the stock portfolio, Brianna's college fund, the savings accounts, the checking accounts, the credit cards, all of them in his name. Daphne had insisted on being a stay-at-home mom after Brianna was born, and Adrian had supported that decision. He'd handled the finances, paid the bills, made the investments, all while Daphne spent, and Brianna demanded. Adrian showered, the hot water streaming over his rigid shoulders. He didn't cry, didn't punch the tile wall, just methodically washed away the stench of betrayal, and formulated his plan. Then he dressed in a crisp button-down and slacks. Today wasn't a day off anymore. Today was the first day of his campaign. The bank opened at 9. Adrian was waiting outside at 8:45, a folder of documents in his briefcase. When the doors unlocked, he was the first customer of the day. "Good morning, Mr. Quinn," said the branch manager, a woman named Patricia who had helped him open Brianna's college fund 17 years ago. "What brings you in so early?" "I need to make some changes to my accounts," Adrian said, his voice neutral, professional. "All of them." 2 hours later, he walked out with everything secured. Joint accounts emptied and closed. New accounts established at a different bank entirely. Credit cards canceled. Automatic payments to household bills suspended. Next stop, the family lawyer. "Are you sure about this, Adrian?" William Bailey asked, peering over his glasses. The lawyer had handled Adrian's parents' estate and had known him for 25 years. "This is severe." "I'm sure," Adrian replied, signing the last document transferring the house solely to his name. The property had always been in his name only, but he wanted to ensure there were no legal loopholes. "I found Daphne in bed with another man yesterday. My daughter told me to disappear. I'm simply taking her advice." William's face tightened with sympathy and something like respect. "Understood. I'll file these immediately." "What about divorce proceedings?" "Not yet. I want everything secured first." The lawyer nodded, gathering the papers. "You know they'll call me when they realize what's happening." "I'm counting on it." By late afternoon, Adrian had visited the DMV to transfer the car titles, called the utilities companies to put everything solely in his name, and even stopped by Brianna's school to have himself listed as the only contact for all financial matters. He returned to his sparse apartment as dusk fell, ordering takeout he didn't taste and mechanically chewing while he continued working at his laptop. Every password changed, every account secured, every asset protected. His phone remained silent. No frantic calls from Daphne, no angry texts from Brianna. They hadn't noticed yet. They were too wrapped up in their new reality, a reality built on Adrian's money, Adrian's house, Adrian's decades of sacrifice. The next day passed in similar fashion. Adrian went to work, explained to his boss that he was dealing with a personal situation, and requested to work remotely for a few weeks. His reputation was such that the request was granted without question. He spent the evening transferring the last of his digital footprint away from the family. Email accounts, streaming services, cloud storage with family photos, all downloaded to his personal drives, then access revoked. Still, his phone didn't ring. The third day, he contacted the mortgage company, the credit card companies, the utility providers. All were informed of the change in his living situation, all payment responsibilities clarified as his alone. That night, he drove past the house. Lights blazed from every window. Reggie's truck in the driveway next to Daphne's SUV. Music thumped through the open windows. They were celebrating. Adrian drove away without stopping. Let them enjoy it while it lasted. On the fourth day, he received a text from Daphne. "Where's your paycheck?" It didn't hit the account. Adrian didn't respond. He simply added the message to his documentation and continued working. The fifth day broke with rain hammering against the apartment windows. Adrian woke from a dreamless sleep, showered, and made a cup of black coffee. He checked his accounts, all secure. He reviewed his documentation, all in order. And then at precisely 8:17 a.m., his phone exploded. 13 missed calls in the span of 20 minutes. 5 from Daphne, 4 from Brianna, 3 from unknown numbers that he suspected were Reggie using different phones, 1 from the house landline. The first voicemail was Daphne, her voice controlled but tight. "Adrian, call me immediately. There's a problem with the accounts." The second was Brianna, less restrained. "Dad, what the heck? Mom can't get money for groceries. Call back now." The third was Daphne again, the control slipping. "This isn't funny, Adrian. We need access to the accounts. Call me or I swear to God." The messages degraded from there. Threats, accusations. By the last one, Daphne was nearly incoherent with rage, promising legal action, public humiliation, destruction. Adrian listened to each message once, his expression unchanging. Then he saved them all to his documentation folder, evidence of their characters when the masks came off. His phone rang again as he was getting dressed. Brianna's face flashed on the screen, a photo from her 16th birthday, when she'd still looked at him with something like respect. He let it go to voicemail. Another call. Daphne. Ignored. A text from an unknown number. "Answer your phone, you coward." Adrian blocked the number and continued with his morning routine. By noon, he had 37 missed calls, 22 voicemails, and 43 text messages. The pattern was clear: initial confusion, then anger, then panic as they realized the full extent of what he'd done. He was sitting at his makeshift desk, calmly eating a sandwich, when the pounding on his door began. "Adrian, open this door right now." Daphne's voice, sharp enough to cut glass. "Dad, we know you're in there." Brianna, her adolescent rage unchecked. Adrian took another bite of his sandwich, chewing thoroughly. Let them pound. Let them scream. The apartment manager would be calling security soon if they continued. "I'll break this door down." That was Reggie, his voice slurred, drinking already at noon. Adrian set his sandwich down and walked to the door. He didn't open it, just stood there listening to their fury crash against the wood like waves against a cliff. "I've called the police." An unfamiliar voice, probably a neighbor. "They're on their way." A stream of curses from Reggie. Daphne's voice, suddenly sugary, apologizing to whoever had threatened police involvement. Brianna's continued demands for entry. Adrian waited until he heard sirens in the distance. Then, and only then, did he open the door. Adrian pulled the door open with a smooth, unhurried motion. The sudden lack of resistance made Daphne stumble forward, her fist raised to continue pounding. She caught herself against the doorframe, her normally perfect blonde hair disheveled, mascara smudged beneath bloodshot eyes. Behind her, Brianna stood with her arms crossed, face blotchy from crying or screaming or both, her designer jeans and top, clothes Adrian had paid for last month, rumpled as if she'd slept in them. Reggie hung back, unsteady on his feet, a day's stubble darkening his jaw. He wore the same shirt Adrian had seen him in at the house, now stained with what looked like pizza sauce. Adrian leaned against the doorframe, coffee mug in hand, the picture of calm. He'd dressed meticulously that morning, pressed slacks, crisp blue button-down, hair neatly combed. The contrast between him and the trio in the hallway couldn't have been more stark. "You evil jerk," Daphne hissed, her finger jabbing toward his chest without quite touching him. "You took all the money. My college fund. You can't do this." Brianna's voice escalated to a shriek that echoed down the hallway. Several doors had opened, neighbors peering out to witness the spectacle. Adrian took a slow sip of his coffee, his eyes never leaving Daphne's face. "I can. And I did." The simple statement, delivered without heat or emphasis, seemed to enrage Daphne beyond words. Her face contorted, a sound between a scream and a sob tearing from her throat. She lunged forward, hands aimed at Adrian's face. He stepped back smoothly, the attack missing him by inches. In the same fluid motion, he closed the door with a decisive click, cutting off her advance. The lock engaged with a solid thunk. Through the door, he could hear Daphne's wordless scream of frustration, Reggie's slurred threats, Brianna's sobbing demands that he open the door again. Adrian returned to his desk, setting his coffee down carefully on a coaster. The pounding resumed, harder now, the door shuddering in its frame. He made a mental note to bill them for any damage, more evidence for his documentation. His phone buzzed with a text from the apartment manager. "Police are here. Want me to have them remove those people?" Adrian typed a quick response. "Yes, please. They're trespassing and causing a disturbance." He returned to his sandwich, taking methodical bites as he listened to the new voices in the hallway, the measured tones of law enforcement, Daphne's attempts to sound reasonable, Reggie's belligerent responses, Brianna's dramatic sobbing. Then, gradually, the sound receded, footsteps moving away, voices fading, the unmistakable sound of the elevator doors opening and closing. His phone buzzed again. "They're gone. Officer wants to know if you want to press charges for the attempted assault." Adrian considered this. "Not at this time. Please have maintenance check the door for damage and bill me directly." Silence settled over the apartment again. Adrian finished his sandwich, washed the plate, and returned to his laptop. The real work was just beginning. First, he checked the home security system he'd installed last year, the one with cameras that uploaded footage to a cloud server he controlled. He navigated to the recordings from the bedroom. Daphne hadn't thought to disable them, likely hadn't even remembered they existed. He downloaded the footage from the past week, not just of the bedroom. He wasn't interested in torturing himself with those images, but of the entire house. The living room, where Reggie had apparently been spending his days drinking Adrian's liquor. The kitchen, where Daphne had been preparing elaborate meals for a lover using Adrian's grocery money. The driveway showing Reggie's truck parked overnight, not just yesterday but for several days prior. All evidence, all ammunition. Next, he pulled up the household financial records. Credit card statements showing restaurant charges, clothing purchases, spa visits, all while Daphne had been claiming they needed to budget more carefully whenever Adrian wanted to upgrade his 10-year-old car. A notification popped up on his screen. An email from Brianna's school confirming the change in financial responsibility and contact information. Effective immediately, all tuition bills, activity fees, and graduation costs would be directed solely to Adrian Quinn. Any request for funds would require his direct approval. Another notification. The mortgage company confirming that they understood Mr. Quinn would be solely responsible for all payments going forward, and that any inquiries from Mrs. Quinn would be redirected to him. The third notification. The power company confirming the change in billing responsibility, and noting that any changes to service would require authorization from the account holder, now exclusively Adrian Quinn. One by one, the dominoes he'd set up began to fall. Each click of his mouse, each digital confirmation, another brick in the wall he was building between his former family and the resources they'd taken for granted. His phone buzzed with a call from an unfamiliar number. Adrian let it go to voicemail. The caller left no message. An email arrived from Daphne's personal account. "You won't get away with this. I'll take you for everything in the divorce." Adrian's lips curved in the first smile he'd allowed himself since walking into that bedroom. She still didn't understand what was happening. She thought this was a temporary inconvenience, a negotiating tactic. She had no idea that he already consulted with the 3 best divorce attorneys in the city, not to hire them, but to create a conflict of interest that would prevent them from representing her. Another email arrived, this one from William Bailey. Daphne called. "I explained I can't discuss your affairs with her. She's looking for a lawyer." Adrian responded, "Thank you. Please continue to deflect. All communication should go through you from now on." By late afternoon, his phone had gone quiet. The initial storm had passed. Now they would be regrouping, strategizing, looking for weaknesses in his approach. They wouldn't find any. Adrian prepared a simple dinner, ate without tasting it, and then returned to his work. There were still loose ends to tie up, investments to secure, insurance policies to update. As darkness fell, he allowed himself to look at family photos for the first time since walking out of the house. Not recent ones, those felt contaminated now. Instead, he scrolled back to images from years ago, Brianna as a toddler, riding on his shoulders. Daphne and him on their honeymoon, her smile seemingly genuine. The 3 of them at the lake house he'd rented for Brianna's 10th birthday. Had it all been a lie, or had something changed along the way? Did it even matter? What mattered was what happened next, not the past, not the pain, just the calculated, methodical dismantling of the life they thought they could have without him. His phone buzzed with a text. "Daphne again. We need to talk about this like adults." Adrian didn't respond. There was nothing to discuss, nothing to negotiate. They had made their choice. He had made his. Another text followed. Brianna needs her medication. The credit card was declined at the pharmacy. This gave Adrian pause. He verified the prescription through the online pharmacy portal. It was legitimate, Brianna's monthly allergy medication. He authorized a one-time payment directly to the pharmacy, then texted Daphne the confirmation code. That's all you'll get from me, he added. Then he blocked her number. Reggie tried calling next. Adrian declined and blocked him too. The final call of the night came from Brianna. Adrian let it ring through to voicemail. Her message was more subdued than her earlier screaming. Dad, please. We're sorry about how everything happened, but you can't just cut us off like this. It's not legal. Mom's talking to lawyers. They say you can't just take everything. Please call back. Adrian saved the message with the others, more evidence of their characters. Apologies, not for what they'd done, but for how it happened. Threats of legal action. No real remorse. He shut down his laptop and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. They would try new tactics. Pleas would return to threats. Threats would become desperate bargaining. He needed to be rested and ready. As he lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, Adrian felt none of the emotions he might have expected. No grief, no rage, no crippling sense of loss. Just a cold, clear purpose. A problem to solve. A project to complete. They had thought he would break. They had laughed when he walked away. Now it was his turn. 2 weeks after the confrontation at his apartment, Adrian sat in his car across the street from the house he once called home. The engine was off, his breathing steady as he observed Reggie's pickup truck in the driveway. It had been there every day, the man making himself comfortable in Adrian's space, spending Adrian's money, sleeping in Adrian's bed. The initial storm had passed. Daphne had been frantically calling lawyers, only to discover that Adrian had already consulted with the top 3 in the city. Conflict of interest. The 4th best was out of the country. The 5th had quoted her a retainer fee she couldn't afford, now that her access to Adrian's money was cut off. Adrian smiled thinly, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. It wasn't enough. The financial stranglehold was just the beginning. Reggie Dawson had always been a problem. A lazy, loudmouth mooch who had orbited Adrian's family for years, always ready with a hard-luck story and an empty wallet. Adrian had tolerated him for Daphne's sake, never suspecting how deep the betrayal would go. But Adrian was an engineer. He understood systems. He knew that every system had points of failure. Reggie's were obvious. His ego, his reputation, and his wandering eye. Adrian started the car and drove to a coffee shop 15 miles away, one he'd never visited before. No chance of running into anyone who knew him. He ordered a black coffee and opened his laptop. For the past week, he'd been gathering intelligence. Reggie's social media passwords hadn't been difficult to crack. The man used the same simple combinations for everything. His email was even easier. Adrian scrolled through Reggie's private messages. The evidence was overwhelming. Reggie hadn't just been sleeping with Daphne. There were at least 4 other women in the past month alone. Each conversation followed the same pattern: flattery, sympathy, promises, explicit photos. Adrian downloaded everything, organizing it meticulously in folders. Then he turned his attention to Reggie's finances. Credit card debt, unpaid loans, a gambling habit that explained why he was always broke despite working sporadically as a contractor. Phase 1 was ready to launch. Adrian created a new email account under a generic name. He attached selected screenshots of Reggie's conversations with other women. Clear enough to be unmistakable, recent enough to overlap with his relationship with Daphne. He hit send. Then he waited. 3 hours later, his phone rang. A number he didn't recognize. He answered and said nothing. "I know it's you." Daphne's voice, tight with fury. "I know you sent those emails." Adrian remained silent, listening to her breathing. "Did you think this would make me come crawling back? After what you did? Why?" Adrian finally spoke, his voice level. "Interesting perspective. You destroy our finances. You left us with nothing. I removed what was mine." Adrian kept his tone conversational. "Just like Reggie removed what was mine. How is Reggie, by the way? Still there, or did the photos change things?" A pause. Daphne's breath caught. You manipulated those images. Did I? Ask him about Jessica and Amanda and Beth. Check his phone while he's sleeping. I'm sure you'll find more names I don't even know about. You're lying. Am I? You know how to find out. Adrian leaned back in his chair. Also, you might want to get tested. Who knows where he's been? He ended the call before she could respond. That night, he drove past the house again. All the lights were on. He could hear shouting even through the closed windows of his car. He caught a glimpse of Daphne through the living room window, gesturing wildly, her face contorted. Phase 1. Complete. The next morning, Adrian woke to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. Most were from Daphne, growing increasingly incoherent. The last few were from an unknown, likely Reggie, after Daphne had kicked him out. Phase 2 was underway. Reggie's social media erupted with the first scheduled post. Within hours, it had been shared dozens of times among his friends. Comments ranged from joking to outright mockery. Dude always said that watch was top of the line. What a fraud. No wonder he's always bumming drinks. Total poser, always knew it. Adrian monitored the fallout from his apartment, sipping coffee, watching Reggie's life unravel in real time. The next post hit 3 days later, as scheduled. This time, the reaction was even stronger. Former friends piled on. Women he'd dated shared their own stories of his lies and manipulation. Reggie tried to claim his account had been hacked, but no one believed him. His desperate denials only fueled more ridicule. By the 5th post, Reggie had become a pariah in his social circle. No one would lend him money, no one would let him crash on their couch, and the contract jobs he relied on dried up as people shared stories of his shoddy work and tendency to overcharge. Adrian's phone rang. Reggie again. This time he answered. I know it's you doing this. Reggie's voice was slurred, likely drunk. You think you're so clever. Hello, Reggie. Sounds like you're having a rough time. You hacked my accounts. You're destroying my life. Adrian leaned back. Interesting theory. Can you prove it? I'll end you for this. Reggie hissed. Another threat. That's 2 now. I'm keeping track. You smug jerk. You think you've won. Won what exactly? Did I know we were competing? Reggie's breathing was heavy, erratic. She didn't love you. She was using you for your money. We both were. I know. Adrian's calm response seemed to catch Reggie off guard. Then why do this? If you don't want her back. Who said anything about wanting her back? Adrian cut him off. This isn't about recovery, Reggie. It's about consequences. You're sick. Maybe. Adrian examined his fingernails. How's the job search going? I hear Miller Construction is hiring. Oh, wait. They won't take you after what happened with their missing supplies last year. The sharp intake of breath told Adrian the barb had landed. How did you? I know everything, Reggie. Every scam, every theft, every woman. And I'm just getting started. He ended the call and blocked the number. The next day, post number 6 hit social media. Details of Reggie's termination from Miller Construction for suspected theft, along with a statement from his former boss. Reggie's truck was found abandoned at a bus station 3 days later. According to the cashier, he bought a one-way ticket to Arizona. Phase 2 complete. Adrian closed his laptop and leaned back, a sense of cold satisfaction washing over him. Reggie had been the easiest target. A man who built his life on deception couldn't withstand having his true nature exposed. Now it was time to turn his attention to the 2 people who had hurt him most deeply. Brianna Quinn had always been the center of her own universe. As Adrian's only child, she'd wanted for nothing: clothes, electronics, vacations, even her own car on her 16th birthday. Her college fund had been Adrian's pride, started the day she was born, and faithfully contributed to each month for 17 years. Now it was gone. Not spent, not stolen, simply moved beyond her reach. Adrian watched from across the street as Brianna emerged from the house. Her shoulders slumped, none of the arrogance that had been her trademark since puberty. Her clothes, once pristine designer labels, were wrinkled, worn multiple times without washing. The expensive highlights in her hair had grown out, showing dark roots. 3 weeks had passed since Adrian had emptied the accounts. The mortgage payment had been due 4 days ago. The electricity would be next, then water. The process would be slow, deliberate, not a quick amputation, but a gradual strangulation. Brianna climbed into her car, a red convertible Adrian had bought her, and tried to start it. The engine turned over, but wouldn't catch. She tried again and again. Finally, she slammed her hands against the steering wheel and screamed, a sound of pure frustration that carried across the quiet street. She got out and kicked the tire, then pulled out her phone. Adrian's phone buzzed a moment later. "Dad, my car won't start. I'm going to be late for school. Can you help?" No threats, no accusations, just a request for help, as if the last month hadn't happened, as if she hadn't told him to disappear from her life. Adrian didn't respond. Instead, he watched as she tried calling someone, probably Daphne, then slumped against the car when there was apparently no answer. Finally, she shouldered her backpack and began walking, head down, toward the bus stop half a mile away. Adrian followed at a distance. He hadn't been to the house in days, focusing instead on monitoring their financial collapse from afar. But today was special. Today was the day Brianna was supposed to put down a deposit to secure her place at Stanford. The acceptance letter had arrived 3 months ago. Adrian had taken the family out to dinner to celebrate. He'd promised Brianna her own apartment off campus, a new laptop, a trip to Europe before classes started. Now he watched as she waited for the bus, checking her phone every few seconds, shoulders hunched against the chilly breeze. Adrian drove to the high school and parked in the visitor section. He walked to the front office and signed in. "I'm here to speak with Mrs. Reynolds," he told the receptionist, Brianna Quinn's college counselor. "Do you have an appointment, Mr. Quinn?" "No, but she'll want to see me." 10 minutes later, he was seated across from Mrs. Reynolds, a stern woman with graying hair and 20 years of experience guiding students to their futures. "Mr. Quinn, I was surprised to see you. I just met with Brianna yesterday. She's quite upset. There seems to be some confusion about her college fund." Adrian nodded. "No confusion. The fund has been reallocated." Mrs. Reynolds blinked. "Reallocated? I don't understand. My wife and I are separating. Financial arrangements are changing. Brianna's college fund is no longer available. But Stanford has already accepted her. The deposit is due today." "I'm aware." Adrian maintained eye contact. "Brianna will need to explore other options. Community college, perhaps. Student loans. I've arranged for all financial communications to come to me directly." "Mr. Quinn, with all due respect, this seems quite sudden. Brianna was counting on." "Life is full of disappointments, Mrs. Reynolds." Adrian stood. "Please direct any further questions to my attorney. I've left his card at the front desk." He walked out, feeling the counselor's shocked gaze on his back. In the parking lot, he saw Brianna getting off the bus, rushing toward the school entrance. She didn't notice him. Adrian returned to his apartment and resumed work. His company had been understanding about his remote schedule, especially given his track record. The current project, a water filtration system for a developing country, required his full attention. He immersed himself in calculations and designs, the work providing a blessed distraction from the controlled demolition of his former life. His phone rang at 3:47 p.m. Brianna. He let it go to voicemail. The message was different from her previous angry tirades. "Dad, I spoke to Mrs. Reynolds. She said you were at school today. I don't understand what's happening. Please call me back. Please." Her voice cracked on the last word. Adrian saved the message and continued working. That evening, he drove to a restaurant near the house. It was Wednesday, pasta night. The three of them had eaten their most Wednesdays for years. He sat at the bar, angled to see the entrance, but not be immediately visible. At 7:15, right on schedule, Daphne and Brianna walked in. Their clothes were noticeably less polished than in the past, Daphne's hair lacking its usual salon-perfect styling. They were seated at their regular table, but instead of the usual easy conversation, they sat in tense silence, studying the menus as if they'd never seen them before. When the waiter came, Adrian watched their exchange, noting how Daphne's smile faltered when she handed over a credit card, how her face drained of color when the waiter returned to say it had been declined. The humiliation was visible even from his position at the bar. Daphne fumbling in her purse, Brianna staring at the table, both of them finally pushing back their chairs and leaving. The untouched water glasses were a testament to their hasty exit. Adrian paid his bill and followed at a distance. They walked rather than drove. Perhaps the car was truly broken. Perhaps they were saving gas money. Their postures told the story. Shoulders hunched, steps quick, the universal body language of shame. He returned to his apartment, satisfied with the day's observations. The process was working exactly as he calculated. At 11:32 p.m., his phone rang again. Brianna. This time, he answered but said nothing. Dad. Her voice was small, uncertain. Are you there? Adrian remained silent, just listening to her breathing. I know you're there. Please say something. He waited. I missed Stanford's deposit deadline today. A pause. Mrs. Reynolds said you told her the money is gone. Still, he said nothing. Dad, please. I worked so hard to get in. You know how much I wanted this. Did I? Adrian finally spoke, his voice level. I thought Reggie was more of a father than I ever was. Those were your words, right? Brianna's breath caught. I didn't mean that. I was upset. Upset enough to tell me to disappear from your life. I'm sorry, okay? I made a mistake. Yes, you did. I understand now. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I need you. The words hung in the air between them. Once, they would have melted his resolve. Once, he would have done anything to protect his little girl from pain. You made your choice. Now live with it. He ended the call and turned off his phone. The next morning, he drove past the house again. A foreclosure notice was taped to the front door. Official proceedings would take months, but the bank had made the first move. Soon, realtors would be calling, inspectors, eventually strangers walking through the rooms, evaluating, judging, deciding if the house Adrian had poured his heart into was worth their money. Brianna was sitting on the front steps, staring at nothing. She looked up as his car passed, her expression changing from blank despair to desperate hope as she recognized the vehicle. She jumped to her feet, running toward the curb. Adrian accelerated, not looking back. Daphne Quinn had built her life on a foundation of entitlement. As a former high school beauty queen who had married well, she cultivated an image of domestic perfection while expecting constant appreciation for doing the bare minimum. Dinner on the table, often takeout. A house relatively clean, with weekly maid service Adrian paid for. Raising their daughter, who had been in daycare, then after-school programs, then largely left to her own devices. Now, 6 weeks after Adrian had walked away, her perfect life was crumbling, brick by carefully arranged brick. Adrian sat in a coffee shop downtown, not far from where Daphne was interviewing for a job. His lawyer had informed him that the court had ordered him to provide temporary support, but he'd managed to delay and minimize it through various legal maneuvers. Just enough to keep them from starving or becoming homeless, not enough for comfort. Daphne emerged from the department store looking defeated. 4th interview, 4th rejection. Her resume was sparse. Almost 20 years as a stay-at-home mom with no recent work experience. The few retail jobs she'd held in college were irrelevant now. She'd been getting by on her looks and Adrian's income for too long. He watched as she walked to the bus stop, checking her reflection in a store window, adjusting her hair. Still attractive at 39, but the strain of recent weeks showed in her face. Fine lines that hadn't been there before, a tightness around her mouth, The confident stride replaced with uncertainty. His phone buzzed with a text from William Bailey. She's looking for a better attorney. None will take her case without a substantial retainer. Adrian smiled. Let me know if that changes. He continued to observe as Daphne boarded the bus, sitting heavily on a seat near the front, staring out the window with empty eyes. So different from the woman who had mockingly asked if he was going to fight for her, who had smirked as he packed his bags, who had laughed with her lover as the door closed behind him. He returned to his apartment and opened his laptop. The surveillance program he'd installed on the home computer before leaving, justified as parental monitoring for Brianna, gave him access to their digital lives. Daphne's increasingly desperate emails to old friends asking for loans, her dating profile on 3 separate sites, her Google searches, how to get emergency cash, jobs no experience needed, qualify for mortgage with no income. The dating profiles were particularly revealing. Daphne had always defined herself through men's approval. With Reggie gone and Adrian withdrawn, she was searching for a new source of validation and support. Adrian checked the IP logs. She'd had 5 dates in the past 2 weeks. None had resulted in a second meeting. His phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. He answered cautiously. Adrian, it's Robert. Robert Wilkins. Adrian frowned, placing the voice. A casual friend from his golf club. Look, this is awkward, but I went on a date with Daphne last night. Adrian raised an eyebrow. I see. I didn't know it was your wife until she mentioned her last name halfway through dinner. Robert sounded uncomfortable. She didn't say anything about you being separated, just that you were working too much. Interesting. Anyway, she started talking about how lonely she was, how she needed help with some bills. It felt off. I made an excuse and left early. Thought you should know. I appreciate the call, Robert. Are you two really split up? The guys at the club have been asking. No one's seen you for weeks. Adrian sighed. Yes, we're divorcing. It's complicated. Sorry to hear it. If you need anything. Thank you. After hanging up, Adrian made a few calls to other men in his social circle. By evening, he confirmed that Daphne had reached out to at least a dozen potential replacements for her meal ticket. All had either declined or quickly backed away once they realized her intentions. The next day, Adrian had a meeting with his attorney. The divorce proceedings were moving forward, but Daphne was fighting every step. Her latest claim was that Adrian had abandoned the family and was punishing them financially. She's getting desperate, William said, reviewing the filings. The judge won't be sympathetic without evidence of abuse or neglect, neither of which existed, but she might get more temporary support if she keeps pushing. Let her push, Adrian replied. I've documented everything. Her affair, Brianna's behavior, their words, their actions. If this goes to court, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of wife and mother she was. William studied him. You really don't want to reconcile. Most couples in these situations. No, Adrian said, the word final. There's nothing to salvage. Very well. I'll continue as directed. That evening, Adrian's doorbell rang. He checked the security camera he'd installed and froze. Daphne stood outside, her appearance shocking even through the grainy footage. Rumpled clothes, smeared makeup from tears, hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. He considered not answering, then curiosity won out. He opened the door but blocked the entrance with his body. What do you want? Daphne looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. Can I come in? Please. No. She flinched at the flat refusal. Adrian, please. We need to talk. We have lawyers for that. Not about the divorce. About us. About what happened. She shifted her weight, glancing past him into the apartment. You're living like this now. This tiny place. My living arrangements are none of your concern. She tried a different approach, her voice softening. I made a mistake, Adrian. A terrible mistake. I see that now. Now that the money's gone, Now that Reggie's gone, now that your comfortable life is gone. It's not about the money. Her eyes welled with fresh tears. I miss you. I miss our family. Our family. The one where my wife was sleeping with my friend, where my daughter told me to disappear. That family. Daphne wiped her eyes. We can fix this. We were a family. No, Adrian said. You were a family. I was your ATM, a source of income. Nothing more. That's not true. We had 17 years together. 17 years where you took and I gave. 17 years where you built a life on my back, then complained I was never around while I worked to pay for everything you wanted. Daphne reached for his arm. He stepped back. Please, Adrian. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Reggie was a mistake. He told me things, made me believe things. I was stupid. Yes, you were. The blunt agreement seemed to catch her off guard. She stared at him, then tried again. Everyone deserves a second chance. We could start over, just the three of us. There is no us. Not anymore. What about Brianna? She's falling apart. She missed her chance at Stanford because of all this. Adrian's expression didn't change. Brianna made her choice. She chose Reggie. She chose you. She chose to tell her father to get out of her life. Actions have consequences. She's just a child. She's 17, old enough to know better, old enough to live with her decisions. Daphne's demeanor suddenly shifted, the vulnerable facade dropping away to reveal the anger beneath. So that's it. You're going to destroy all our lives because your ego was bruised. My ego? Adrian almost smiled. This isn't about ego. It's about justice. The courts won't let you do this. Daphne snapped. They'll make you pay support. They'll give me the house. They'll force you to fund Brianna's education. Perhaps, but they can't force me to forgive. They can't force me to be the man I was before. Adrian stepped back. Goodbye, Daphne. This isn't over. She called as he began to close the door. You can't just throw away 17 years. I didn't throw them away, Adrian said quietly. You did. He closed the door on her protests. Through the wood, he could hear her continue pleading, then shouting, then finally sobbing. He returned to his desk and resumed work, her cries fading into background noise until eventually silence fell. Adrian checked the security camera again. Daphne was gone. His phone buzzed with an email from William Bailey. Daphne contacted me again. Tried to negotiate directly. I reminded her all communications must go through legal channels. She's getting worried about the house. Adrian leaned back, a sense of cold satisfaction washing over him. The plan was working perfectly. The careful, methodical isolation and dismantling of his former family's comfortable existence was proceeding on schedule. Daphne would try again. Brianna would call again. But the outcome was fixed, unchangeable. They had made their choice the moment they betrayed him. And Adrian Quinn was a man who never forgave. 3 months after walking out of his former life, Adrian Quinn sat across from Harris Stone, CEO of Ridgeway Engineering. The restaurant was upscale, but not ostentatious. Crisp white tablecloths, attentive service, the quiet murmur of business conversations creating a backdrop for their meeting. Your water filtration system design is revolutionary, Stone said, setting down the portfolio Adrian had presented. The cost efficiency alone would make it attractive, but the sustainability metrics, those are game-changing. Adrian nodded, maintaining his composed exterior, while internally noting another milestone in his calculated resurrection. Thank you. I've been developing the concept for years, but recent changes in my personal circumstances gave me the time to refine it properly. Stone raised an eyebrow. I heard something about that. Divorce, was it? In progress, Adrian took a sip of water. The legal proceedings are tedious but necessary. These things happen. Stone waved a hand dismissively. Barbara and I almost split after 20 years. Worked through it eventually. Kids make it complicated. I have no interest in reconciliation, Adrian said flatly. Something in his tone made Stone pause, then nod. Fair enough. Back to business, then. You're proposing to head up a new division. Yes. My design is just the beginning. I have 12 other concepts ready for development. With proper backing and the right team, we could corner the market in sustainable water infrastructure within 5 years. Stone studied him. Ambitious. I like it. But why Ridgeway? With your reputation, you could start your own firm, secure venture capital. I could, Adrian said. But building from scratch would take time I'd rather spend on innovation. Ridgeway has the infrastructure, the network, and the manufacturing capabilities. I bring the ideas and expertise. It's a natural partnership. And your compensation requirements. Fair market rate for the position, plus 5% of gross revenue from the new division, and sole patent rights for any designs I develop. Stone whistled. Aggressive terms. My designs will generate billions over their lifetime. 5% is modest. I'll need board approval. Stone extended his hand. But you have my support. Welcome to Ridgeway, Adrian. Adrian shook the offered hand, another piece falling into place. As they finished lunch and parted ways, Adrian checked his phone. 3 missed calls from Daphne's newest attorney. Her 4th in as many months, each less qualified than the last as her options dwindled. 2 texts from Brianna, increasingly desperate in tone. He deleted them without reading and called Mia Sinclair instead. How did it go? Maya asked, her voice warm but professional. Exactly as expected. Stone offered the position. Congratulations. He could hear the smile in her voice. Should we celebrate tonight? Dinner at 8. Perfect. I have court until 6, but I'll meet you at Giovanni's. Adrian ended the call, a hint of a smile touching his lips. Meeting Mia had been unexpected. The corporate attorney had initially been consulted regarding his divorce proceedings, but their professional relationship had gradually evolved. She was intelligent, self-sufficient, and refreshingly direct. Everything Daphne wasn't. Their relationship was still new, just 6 weeks old, but already it had a comfortable rhythm. Mia understood his work schedule because hers was equally demanding. She maintained her own apartment, her own friends, her own life. She neither needed nor wanted a caretaker or provider. Adrian drove toward his apartment, taking a detour that brought him past his former neighborhood. Force of habit made him slow as he approached the house, and what he saw made him pull over completely. A moving truck sat in the driveway, 2 men carrying out furniture, the living room couch, followed by the dining table. Daphne stood on the front lawn, arms crossed tightly over her chest, watching each item being loaded with stiff resignation. Adrian's phone rang. William Bailey. I was about to call you, Adrian answered. There's a moving truck at the house. That's why I'm calling. The judge finally signed off on the temporary agreement. Daphne has to vacate the property within 30 days. Looks like she's not waiting for the deadline. Where's she going? Her sister's place in Oakdale, according to the paperwork. It's a studio apartment above the sister's garage. Adrian processed this information. Oakdale was a 2-hour drive away, a small town with limited employment opportunities and a significantly lower standard of living than what Daphne was accustomed to. And Brianna. For now, she's going with her mother. She tried to petition the court directly, claiming you abandoned her and requesting restoration of the college fund. The judge denied it, given her age and the circumstances. Good. Adrian watched as Daphne's prized antique mirror, a family heirloom she'd inherited from her grandmother, was awkwardly maneuvered into the truck. Keep me updated. He ended the call and continued watching. Brianna appeared in the doorway, carrying a small box of personal items. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, her face bare of makeup, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweatshirt. She looked younger somehow, more vulnerable, stripped of the armor of privilege she'd worn for so long. She set the box in what appeared to be Daphne's car, then turned and looked directly at Adrian's. Even from this distance, he could see her freeze, recognition dawning. She took a hesitant step toward him, then another. Adrian put the car in drive and pulled away. The celebratory dinner with Mia was pleasant and understated. Unlike Daphne, who would have insisted on champagne and a public announcement, Maya simply raised her wine glass and offered a sincere congratulations. "Thank you." Adrian met her eyes over the rim of his own glass. "For more than just the good wishes. Your advice on the contract terms was invaluable." Mia smiled, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "Just doing my job, though I usually charge considerably more than dinner for legal consultation. Send me a bill." "I might." Her eyes held a hint of mischief. "I have a ruthless reputation to maintain." The easy banter continued through dinner. Maya shared stories from her latest case. Adrian discussed his plans for the new division. Neither attempted to dominate the conversation or steer it toward personal revelations. It was respectful, balanced, adult. As they finished dessert, Mia's expression grew more serious. "William called me today. Daphne contacted my firm, trying to hire me. That's a conflict of interest. Obviously. And I never spoke with her directly. Our receptionist recognized the name and alerted me immediately." Maya studied him. "It's a desperate move, Adrian. She's running out of options." "That was her choice." "I know." Mia reached across the table, briefly touching his hand. "I'm not advocating for her. I just thought you should know." Adrian nodded, appreciating her directness. "Thank you." Later, as they walked to their cars, Maya asked, "Your place or mine tonight?" "Neither, unfortunately. I have an early meeting with the Ridgeway design team tomorrow. Need to prepare." Mia nodded, unsurprised and unoffended. "Thursday, then." "Thursday works." He kissed her briefly and stepped back. "Congratulations again on the position," she said. "You've earned it." As Adrian drove home, he reflected on the contrast between Mia and Daphne. With Mia, there were no emotional manipulations, no unstated expectations, no pouting when he chose work over leisure. Just two adults with mutual respect and clear boundaries. He arrived at his apartment building to find Brianna sitting on the steps leading to the entrance. She looked up as his headlights swept over her, rising slowly to her feet. She'd clearly been waiting for hours, her thin jacket inadequate against the evening chill. Adrian parked but remained in his car, watching as she approached. For a moment, he considered driving away. Then curiosity won out. He stepped out and faced her. "How did you find this address?" His voice was neutral. Brianna hugged herself, either from cold or nervousness. "Mom had it." "From the court papers." Adrian waited, saying nothing more. "Can we talk?" Her voice was small. "Please." "There's nothing to discuss." "Dad, please." Her eyes filled with tears. "We lost everything. The house, the cars, even my college spot. We're moving to Aunt Jenna's garage apartment. A garage, Dad. And I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen to us. Mom can't find a decent job. My friends won't talk to me anymore. The school counselor says I might not even graduate if I transfer now. These are all consequences of choices you made. I was stupid. I was wrong." Brianna stepped closer, her voice breaking. "I understand now what you did for us all those years. How hard you worked, how we took advantage." Adrian studied his daughter. The privileged princess was gone. Before him stood a frightened girl, finally facing reality for the first time in her life. "Dad." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I need you." Once, that would have been enough. Once, he would have opened his arms, welcomed her back, forgiven everything. "You made your choice. Now live with it." Adrian moved past her toward the building entrance. "Dad, wait." Brianna grabbed his arm. "You can't just leave us like this. We're your family." Adrian gently but firmly removed her hand. "No, you're not. Not anymore. Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? Tears streaked down her face. I have nothing. Now you understand how I felt that day. Adrian's voice remained steady. When I walked in on your mother with Reggie, when you told me to disappear, when you said Reggie was more of a father than I ever was. I had nothing then too. But you recovered. You're doing fine. Better than fine. Brianna gestured at his car, his clothes, the upscale apartment building. You could help us if you wanted to. I could, but I don't want to. The blunt response silenced her momentarily. Then she tried again, her voice smaller. I'm your daughter. Your only child. Biology doesn't create obligation, Brianna. Respect does. Loyalty does. You showed me neither. I was 17. I made a mistake. Yes, and at 17, you're old enough to face the consequences. Adrian reached for the door. Don't come here again. Where am I supposed to go? She repeated, almost wailing now. Ask Reggie. He was more of a father than I ever was, remember? He's gone. He left town months ago. Then I guess you'll have to figure it out on your own. Like I did. Adrian opened the door. Goodbye, Brianna. Dad, please. She tried to follow him inside, but the security door closed firmly between them. Please don't do this. Adrian walked to the elevator without looking back, her pleas fading as the doors closed. In his apartment, he poured himself a small glass of whiskey and stood by the window, watching until Brianna finally gave up and walked away, shoulders hunched, defeated. His phone rang. Daphne. He declined the call and blocked the number. Another call. Brianna. Blocked. A text from an unknown number. You heartless jerk. That's your child out there. Likely Daphne's sister. Blocked. Adrian finished his whiskey and prepared for bed. Tomorrow was the first day of his new position at Ridgeway. A new chapter. The old one was closing, exactly as he had planned. 2 weeks later, Adrian stood in his new office at Ridgeway Engineering. Corner suite, wall of windows, his name on the door. His team of engineers was already producing promising results on the first project. The board had approved his ambitious 5-year plan. His salary had doubled from his previous position, plus stock options, plus the percentage of division revenue he'd negotiated. Mia had helped him find a new home, not a house like his previous one, but a modern condo in the city's most exclusive building. The purchase was scheduled to close next month. His phone rang. William Bailey. It's done, the attorney said. The judge signed the final divorce decree this morning. It's over. Adrian let that sink in. The terms. Exactly as we proposed. Daphne gets the minimum support required by law for 24 months. Time to establish herself professionally. As the judge put it, you retain all assets, all accounts, all investments. Clean break. And Brianna. She's nearly 18, so no child support was ordered. You're not obligated to provide for her education, though the judge did make a personal appeal that you might reconsider once emotions have settled. I won't. I told him as much. William paused. For what it's worth, I've never seen you like this before. So cold. People change. Indeed. Another pause. Will there be anything else? Yes. I want to know when the house sells, every detail. I'll make sure you're informed. Adrian ended the call and turned back to his computer. The divorce was final. The last legal tie to his former life was severed. He should have felt something. Relief, perhaps, or satisfaction. Instead, there was only cool awareness of another step completed. That evening, he had dinner with Mia at her apartment. She cooked. Nothing elaborate, just a simple pasta dish and salad. They ate at her small table, discussing their days, future plans, a book they'd both read recently. I heard about the divorce, she said eventually. William mentioned it was finalized. Adrian nodded. This morning. How do you feel about it? He considered the question. It was inevitable. The legal process was merely a formality. Mia studied him. That's not what I asked. I don't feel anything in particular. It's done. I've moved on. Have you? Mia set down her fork. Because from where I sit, you haven't moved on at all. You're still engaged in a battle with them, even if it's one-sided now. Adrian frowned. I'm not sure what you mean. I mean that genuine indifference wouldn't include tracking their every move, monitoring the house sale, blocking their numbers only to check your blocked messages. These aren't the actions of someone who's moved on. Her assessment was uncomfortably perceptive. Adrian said nothing. I like you, Adrian, Mia continued. You're intelligent, driven, honest about what you want. But I need to know if there's room in your life for something new, or if you're still too occupied with destroying the old. You think I'm obsessed with revenge? Yes, but it's not endless. There's a finish line. And where is that line? Adrian met her gaze. When they understand completely. When they've lost everything, just as you did. When they have their last goodbye. Mia nodded slowly. And then I'll be ready to fully invest in what comes next, if that's what we both want. Mia reached across the table, taking his hand. I can wait to find out. Just don't make me wait too long. A month later, Adrian received the call he'd been waiting for. The house was being shown to serious buyers. He drove there on a Sunday afternoon, parking across the street as a realtor led a young couple through the property. Daphne and Brianna had been gone for weeks, relocated to the sisters' garage apartment in Oakdale. According to William's sources, Daphne had found work as a receptionist at a small insurance office, a far cry from her previous life of leisure. Brianna had transferred to the local high school, where her designer clothes and entitled attitude had quickly marked her as an outsider. Reggie Dawson had indeed left town, his reputation destroyed, his prospects non-existent. Last known whereabouts, Phoenix, Arizona, working as a day laborer on construction sites. A man who had once boasted about his contracting business reduced to carrying lumber and mixing concrete for minimum wage. Adrian watched as the couple emerged from the house, talking animatedly with the realtor. Young professionals by the look of them. First-time homebuyers excited about the prospect of starting a family in this perfect suburban setting. His phone buzzed with a text from Mia. Dinner tonight. Adrian typed a response. Yes, my place. 7 p.m. Her reply came quickly. Perfect. See you then. He smiled slightly, then returned his attention to the house. The realtor was pointing out features of the garden. The rose bushes Adrian had planted for Daphne's birthday 5 years ago. The young woman nodded enthusiastically while her husband examined the quality of the fence Adrian had installed himself. They spent nearly an hour at the property, clearly serious about purchasing. When they finally left, driving away in their sensible mid-range sedan, Adrian felt a sense of completion setting in. The house would sell. Strangers would live there. All physical traces of the Quinn family would be erased, just as the emotional bonds had been. His revenge was complete. Daphne was working a dead-end job in a town where she knew no one but her sister. Brianna's bright future had dimmed to a struggle for basic stability. Reggie was broken and humiliated, forced to start over with nothing. And Adrian? Adrian had emerged stronger, wealthier, more focused. The pain they had inflicted had burned away everything soft and trusting in him, leaving only a hardened core of determination and self-reliance. His phone rang, an unknown number with an Arizona area code. Curious, he answered. Adrian, it's Reggie. Adrian said nothing, just listened to the background noise. Construction sounds, men shouting in Spanish, machinery whirring. I know you're there. Reggie's voice was different now, the cocky edge gone, replaced by something beaten down. I wanted to tell you that you won, okay? Are you happy now? You destroyed me. I'm living in a crummy apartment in Phoenix, working construction for cash. My back is killing me. My social media is still a disaster. I can't even get a date. Reggie's bitter laugh turned into a cough. I hope you're enjoying yourself. Finally, Adrian spoke. Why are you calling, Reggie? I don't even know. Maybe I thought. Hell, I don't know what I thought. That you'd be satisfied by now. That maybe you could ease up a little. Daphne and the kid are suffering too, you know. It's not just me. That was always the point. Jesus, Adrian, it was just sex. People have affairs every day. They don't usually destroy 3 lives over it. It wasn't just sex. It was betrayal. From all of you. Fine. We betrayed you. We hurt you. I get it. But this revenge thing, it's not healthy. Man, your opinion of my mental health is irrelevant. You cruel jerk, Reggie muttered. I always thought you were just uptight, but you're something else entirely. Goodbye, Reggie. Adrian ended the call and blocked the number. He sat in his car a while longer, watching as the realtor placed a sale pending sign in front of the house. It was almost over. The last piece of his old life was being transferred to strangers. Adrian started his car and drove away, not looking back. 6 weeks later, Adrian stood in his new condo, admiring the view of the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The space was modern, minimalist, devoid of the cluttered memories that had filled his previous home. Mia moved around the kitchen, preparing coffee with the easy confidence of someone becoming comfortable in a new environment. "The closing is this afternoon?" she asked, bringing him a steaming mug. Adrian nodded. 3 o'clock. The young couple was approved for their mortgage. Everything's in order. "Are you going?" "Yes." Mia studied him. "Do you think that's wise? Seeing Daphne again? She won't be there. The realtor arranged for separate closings. I'll sign my papers at 3. She'll sign hers at 5. Adrian sipped his coffee. "But I'm going to drive by afterward." "Closure." "Something like that." Mia hesitated, then nodded. "Want company?" "No, this is something I need to do alone." He set down his mug and pulled her close. "But dinner after, definitely." She kissed him quickly, then stepped back. "I have court at 10. See you tonight." After she left, Adrian went through his morning routine with practiced efficiency. Shower, dress, breakfast, check emails. The new division at Ridgeway was exceeding projections. His design team had completed the first prototype ahead of schedule. The board was already discussing expansion. Everything was proceeding exactly as he planned. At 2:30, he drove to the title company. The signing process was brief and businesslike. Papers pushed across the table, signatures applied, handshakes exchanged. By 3:45, Adrian Quinn was officially no longer the owner of the house he had purchased for his family 10 years ago. He should have felt something, loss, perhaps, or nostalgia. Instead, there was only cool satisfaction at another task completed. He drove to the house, no longer his house, and parked across the street. The sold sign stood in the front yard. A small moving truck was already in the driveway, the young couple carrying boxes into their new home. Adrian watched them for a while. Their excitement was palpable, their movements energetic, their future bright. They had no idea of the pain that had unfolded within those walls, the betrayal, the coldness, the calculated dismantling of 3 lives. Movement at the end of the street caught his attention. A battered Honda approached slowly, Daphne's sister's car, from the court records. It pulled to a stop behind his. Daphne emerged from the passenger side. She looked thinner, her once perfect hair cut shorter in a simpler style, her clothes off the rack rather than designer, her face showing new lines of stress and defeat. She stood by the car for a moment, staring at the house, the sold sign, the moving truck, the young couple building their new life in her old home. Then her gaze shifted, landing on Adrian's car. Her eyes widened. She hesitated, then walked toward him. Adrian considered driving away, then decided against it. This final confrontation had always been inevitable, the last act in his calculated drama. He stepped out of his car as she approached, her steps slowing. "I thought that might be you," she said, her voice lacking the confidence it once held. William said you'd already signed the papers. I did. So, why are you here? Adrian glanced toward the house. Same reason as you, I imagine. Seeing it end, Daphne followed his gaze, watching as the couple carried more boxes inside. They look happy. For now. She flinched slightly at the implied prediction. You didn't have to come and gloat. I'm not gloating. I'm observing. The final piece of your revenge plan. Daphne's voice held a bitter edge. Watching us lose everything while you thrive. Something like that. Daphne hugged herself, suddenly looking older than her 39 years. Are you satisfied now? We've lost everything. The house, the cars, our savings, even Brianna's future. Actions have consequences. It was a mistake, Adrian, a terrible mistake. People make mistakes. And people pay for them. Daphne's eyes filled with tears. For how long? When does the punishment end? When will it be enough? It already is enough. This, Adrian gestured toward the house, this is the end. The final page. And what happens now? She swallowed. We just cease to exist for you. Yes. She stared at him, tears spilling over. 17 years of marriage, a child together. And we just stop existing. You stopped existing for me the moment I walked into that bedroom, Adrian said. The rest was just aftermath. What about Brianna? She's still your daughter. Biology doesn't create obligation, he repeated evenly. She's nearly an adult, old enough to live with the choices she made. Daphne's shoulders slumped. I don't even recognize you anymore. The Adrian I married would never be this cruel. The Adrian you married died the day you betrayed him. I need to go. That's it. Daphne's voice cracked. After everything, that's all you have to say. Adrian looked at her one last time. This woman he had once loved, once trusted, once built a life with. He felt nothing. No anger, no pain, not even satisfaction. Just a cool emptiness where emotions used to be. That was your last goodbye, he said quietly. He got in his car and drove away, not looking back to see Daphne standing on the curb, not wondering if Brianna was waiting in her aunt's car, not caring what became of them now. His phone rang. Mia. How did it go? She asked. It's done. Are you okay? Adrian considered the question, taking stock of himself as he navigated through traffic. Yes, I am. Ready for dinner. I'm thinking that new place on 7th. Sounds perfect. Meet you there at 7. As he ended the call, Adrian caught a glimpse of himself in the rearview mirror. His face was calm, composed, unburdened. The house was sold, the divorce was final, the betrayers were suffering, and his new life was taking shape exactly as planned. It was over. He had won. And now finally, he could move forward without looking back. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.